Carlos Nelson with What's Up, Kansas City, Worldwide, and Wichita. Today, we're introducing our new host of our business channel that will be diving into economic issues, how they affect Black business, as well as the overall diaspora that is spread on the globe, and what the implications are of our banking system and how that system was constructed. Our new host, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Murray D. Anderson Sr. How you doing, Murray?
Yes, sir. Mr. Carlos Nelson, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I appreciate the opportunity to share this time.
Hey, Mr. Anderson, give our community a rundown of who you are and why the banking system and the economic structure that glues this country together, that has kept us out of primarily the prosperity that America claims to have for
all. Sure. Well, you introduced me as Murray D. Anderson Sr. That's who I am. I'm also chairman and founder of Freedmen's International Bankshares, which was founded in 2021 on March the 3rd, in the spirit of the Freedmen's Savings Bank and Trust that was established by the Freedmen's Bureau Act in 1865 on March the 3rd by Abraham Lincoln. And this was the pivotal, critical point to create the foundation for economic and financial inclusion for the enslaved, for the freed men who had just fought in the Civil War. Many of the soldiers took their money and put their money in this bank, Freedmen's Savings Bank and Trust. It was an enormous opportunity that was actually taken away from the African American and left us without a financial institution that could really change the course of history. So we believe that the resurrection and the spirit of this institution is very, very important in the 21st century to redefine or actually define financial and economic inclusion at the top of the economic food chain in our nation, because that's where the disconnected aspects of reality really, in fact, exist. In simple terms, we need access to capital. We need direct access to the financial instruments that exist in the tool chest of the United States Treasury. And without having equal access to those financial instruments, financial and economic inclusion is in fact a 2021, 21st century illusion.
Tell me this, and tell our audience this. Can you point out specific ways that we are excluded, people of color, in the structure of our financial institutions?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Let's talk about how the system provides, and I'm talking about a current experience, an existing experience that we're having right now. We're just going through what was called the COVID pandemic, COVID-19. Okay, it exposed how vulnerable the African American community was, in fact, or is, in fact. The American Rescue Plan, which was a bill that was passed by Congress, signed by President Biden, created $1.9 trillion. Was that the $1.9 trillion that was provided by the bill that President Biden signed this year to address the conditions and circumstances brought on by a pandemic and COVID. Very important. So one of the first things that we saw, what we experienced is that in fact, that the United States has tremendous capacity to create capital and financial resources in the marketplace when there's a problem, if the priority is in fact to do so. So what's happened to the African American is that we have not been the priority. So what took place was that when that bill was passed, which was a good thing, the Congress, inside that bill, there was $10 billion appropriated in what's called the State Small Business Credit Initiative for socially and economically disadvantaged businesses. Okay. Your question was, why are we disconnected from the financial resources that we in fact need? Here's a great example. I was privileged on June the 6th to get a meeting set with Lieutenant Governor David Tolan, who is also in the state of Kansas, who is also the Secretary of Commerce of the state of Kansas. He wears two hats. I put a proposal together that would request $150 million from the State Small Business Credit Initiative. Okay. Now, let me share this with you and put it in the right context. The United States Treasury had been appropriated $10 billion to fund the State Small Business Credit Initiative Fund. The state of Kansas had been allocated $56 million is the allocation. Well, there's a provision in a statute that says that the state could also, in fact, request a allocation modification agreement. Okay. So what I proposed was, now here's the reason. I knew that the state had been appropriated $50 million, but I also knew that the mentality of a white supremacist in the state of Kansas is not going to allow Black people and brown people to have direct access to those funds, okay? Because what usually happens, and traditionally has happened, the local or state, at the state government level, the funds are always redirected or reappropriated, which
all right, let's move
we
on.
end up with nothing.
Let's move on. I'm gonna give a quick synopsis of that. Sure. As it relates to my personal experience. Covert came out, this money came out, and it came out, no other words to say, to white people, to the people that are controlling the economics of these cities and what have you.
That's correct.
Then the portion of that money that was designated for Black business and so forth, they have one or two Blacks that they deal with in the business sector that are connected to the community. And then they have them go out to small businesses in the Black community and get them involved in these loans and what have you. But I don't think it's a real legitimate process. I think it's the same process that has been used time and time again to let's help the poor, the indigent, and what have you. And they've been doing that for, I'm 70, the last 70 years, personal experience, and we still seem to be in the same position while the government dollars are coming and being allocated, but they're not reaching the people that need the assistance, in a nutshell.
Well, that's correct. And that's the bottom line. The bottom line is to gain and have equal access. Well, that cannot happen and doesn't happen if the people at the state level who control access to the federal dollars, number one, divert the money to some other cause, okay? And number two, don't have our interests at heart, because in my example with David Tolan, the man refused to ask the United States Treasury or submit a modification agreement and ask for $150 million in our behalf and put us in front of him and let us tell our story.
What I want to ask you is, what can our community do? What can our political representation do to try to change the narrative on how monies that are allocated that should come to Black business into our community? Let's talk about some solutions real quick. We're on a time.
Well, I can only share with you specifically what I'm doing. What I'm doing is exposing, first of all, the inability of the state of Kansas to act in behalf of Black and brown people at the highest.
Let me cut you off on that. Why do you keep going to just the state of Kansas? Well, I'm talking about Black people in general, and you keep referencing Kansas.
The reason is that the people, the state of Missouri is behaving the same way. It's about the behavior of the state, and the state behaves within that context. States' rights is a code word, okay, for economic exclusion.
Hold it. What I'm saying is that needs to be explained. But the way you were presenting this, this is just in Kansas. Now,
this is in 50 states. Which is why the communities look like they look.
That needs to be explained. But let me say this. As I said, we're working on a time schedule.
Sure.
Behind you, you have Dred Scott. Off the camera, I asked you, why do you have Dred Scott behind you?
Because that was the most important discussion, argument in the history of this country. It was about our rights, whether or not Dred Scott had rights. And in what the Supreme Court in the state of Missouri decided is that because Dred Scott was not a citizen, he had no rights, and he had no rights that a white man had to honor.
Where was Dred Scott born, if you know?
Dred Scott was born, I believe Dred Scott was born in North Carolina. He was born back east.
And he was not a citizen. He was born here in this country.
He was born in this country, and he was brought to the state of Missouri after he was sold, okay? What the rules were, or the protocols were between states, is that if a slave left and went to a free state, then he was free. Dred Scott had been taken from Missouri and went to Illinois. Illinois was a free state, okay? His owner brought him back to Missouri and sold him and continued to enslave him and his family. So the importance of Dred Scott is that Dred Scott may not have been a citizen, but Dred Scott had certain inalienable rights that were God-given, and those rights were not respected.
All right, I want to move on before we close out. Tell our audience about some of the guests and some of the subjects that you'll be covering in the future.
Well, some of the guests, we intend to have the Federal Reserve Bank's top community development, I'm going to say personality, in the person of Mr. Dale Gines, who has done a tremendous amount of work, has a PhD, in fact, in community and economic development, and is a very high-level operative of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. So we intend to have him on. We will also engage with Dr. Jeffrey Hornsby from the Block School of Business and Public Administration. He is the chair of the Entrepreneurship Center there at the Block School. We intend to have on Lieutenant Governor Tolan to talk about these real defined issues and bring about some clarity about and challenge the behavior of the state of Kansas. There's a gentleman also that we hopefully will be able to get on. It'll be difficult. He's at the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. His name is Art Lindo, who runs the Partnership of Progress for Minority Depository Financial Institutions there at the board. So these are just some of the people that we will hopefully be able to have on the show.
I'm looking forward to, as you know, we're doing our HBCU series on presidents. I'm hopefully that we're going to be able to introduce some of their professors on your show that are in that business lane and financial lane, because hopefully that through your lane in business that we can start discussing cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and how that is going to affect the financial systems that we're operating under today. And I think that we would like to have get involved on our worldwide channel because we're in the continent of Africa. And I think the things that are affecting us here are surely affecting them in a more devastating way behind being colonized and the debts that and the contracts that they had to sign that has kept them in a negative position. I'm hoping that we can discuss all of that through your business channel.
No, I'm excited about that, and because one of the, a tremendous, the culprit of Africa is the treaty of that was created in 1885 at the Berlin Conference, when the United States and the European nations, Germany and Great Britain, divided up.
Not a black man at the table.
Right, and carved it up, and somebody got South Africa, and somebody got the Congo, and somebody got Zimbabwe, and where all of the wealth, that's where all the wealth was extracted from Africa, which built Europe and built the United States. So it's that conspiracy that has to be acknowledged and revealed in this 21st century. It is the source of the problem, because America's practice, they talk about capitalism, but what America's been practicing since its existence is colonialism. disguised it as capitalism, which is the systematic exploitation of everything above the ground and on the ground, including the people. That's all it is.
All right. What would you have to say in your closing statements?
Well, in my closing statement, I must say to you that although these challenges exist, we walk by faith and not by sight. So it doesn't matter what we see. We know how to straighten it out. We understand the problem, and we know how to fix it. And we have both. And because we understand the problem, we also have the solution. And the solution is to gain equal access to the most powerful financial instrument that exists on the face of the earth, which is not money. It's America's commitment and promise to pay.
All right.
That's where all of the power is in this nation. It's in that commitment of America's promise to pay.
Excellent. I specifically will be putting my request into you to interview some of these bank presidents of our local institutions.
Absolutely.
I bank at Liberty, and that's supposed to be a Black bank, and they have all kinds of surcharges for having accounts and what have you. And a lot of the other banks, they don't have that. And that's not those are not Black banks. They don't charge you to have accounts and so forth. And I think all of these type of things have to be looked at, especially when we have institutions, organizations that are claiming that they're working on the behalf of Black people and Black business.
No, and Carlos, I agree with you, like totally. And I'm not hating on Liberty Bank, but when they came to town, they didn't have any capital. They were given the franchise of the failed Douglas Bank, which basically was a cash for cash transaction. They have not grown since they have been here. They've been here since 2008. The Douglas Bank was the first bank to fail in 2008. And what we can't look away and allow our own institutions to be put in a position to pretend to be functioning or have the capacity to function in our best interest when they really don't. Because what it does is it undermines everything that you try to do and every other African-American small business entrepreneur tries to do to change the conditions. So in my mind, Liberty Bank needs to exit this marketplace and give up the position to another group that will fight the fight, because they're not fighting the fight here in Kansas City that we have to fight. They may be fighting it in New Orleans or in Baton Rouge, but they're certainly not fighting the fight here. And by that, I mean, I'm going to define that for you. When I talk about gaining equal access to the financial and credit instruments that exist at the United States Treasury, that's a discussion that the leadership of Liberty Bank should have exercised when they came to town, because these tools have always been available and they never went to the table and asked for the right tools. So that's kept us from growing. That's why Wyandotte County looks like it looks. That's why the crime rate is high, because we're cannibalizing one another, because we can't raise everybody's boat.
Well, I don't have no sympathy for them. I've got 5 accounts there, and they charge a lot of money, but I'm getting ready to exit that situation.
And I'm not hating on them. I'm not hating on them.
It's not about hate. We are talking business. We are talking economics. And now, if this bank doesn't charge for you having a checking account, and this bank does, and it's a black bank and has a lot of black customers, then there's something wrong with that. How are you
Yes.
helping us? And I'm
Yes.
saying liberty is just one of the many things that I want our business channel when it comes to economics. I hate to even say things like this, but I want to know what Economic Development Corporation is doing with their money. They're getting money. There's Alonzo, I forgot what his name is. Do you know that he runs an operation?
Yes. Alt cap.
Alcat. What are they doing? Who are they serving? And what are the terms that they're serving? Because they're receiving money from the federal government and other agencies that are supposed to service black businesses and deprived businesses. And I don't think there's any watchdog to see what they're doing, looking at their books. But as I had said to them in the past, that as Cascade Media grows, we will hire people just to look at what you're doing. Because
Well, I think that's important. And I would invite Mr. Alonzo to our show because one of the other things that we can't do, we must stop, and that is these organizations that are pain pimps and they're pimping our pain and producing nothing.
I want to look at Economic Development Corporation because we've tried to work with them in the last 2 years. They have gaslighted us on interviews and so forth, and they might think that we have forgotten. Any one of you corporations or organizations that are looking at this interview, I told you we'll be back. And we're going to look into what is holding black business in our community behind. And we're going to be looking at your books. And we're going to be looking at your emails, especially if you're nonprofit. You have to disclose this.
Well, in my mind, the nonprofit entity, and again, I'm not hating on that structure because it has its place, but what it cannot do is, and what it hasn't done, which has been its history in our community, is that it's not sustainable. I mean, in that, think about it. There's not a single investment that was made in a for-profit seed and venture capital or equity fund in Kansas City that became a public company that was dedicated to funding entrepreneurship in the Black community. After millions and tens of millions of dollars, both government and private, have been said to be designed and channeled through not-for-profits that are supposed to address the problem of disparity and economic deprivation in low and moderate income communities. That's absolute nonsense. If the American system runs on profit, for-profit institutions grow. Not-for-profits don't have the capacity to grow. And in not-for-profits, no one has to take personal responsibility for the success of the failure of the organization. Or the organization's mission.
I'm gonna cut you off on that because we're getting ready to close out. I'm gonna end with this. Cascade Media Group, we've been interviewing HBCU presidents. And after the interview, I've talked to a couple of them for 30 minutes, 40 minutes on the condition of the Black community. You hit it on the head. As I have said, and they're in total agreement, our whole community is on a nonprofit footing. around this country, because it's designed, everything we do is somewhat nonprofit. And when you have your hand out, you have to drink their Kool-Aid. And
Yes,
not only do you have to drink it, they require you to give it to your community.
yes,
All things given, and the 1/3 of our community that have all these degrees and that are in these positions, they're supposed to be working on our behalf. I'm not saying that they don't, but they're limited at what they're doing because they're making these salaries and they don't want to lose those salaries because they're in the 1/3 of our community that's doing halfway well, and all of them have family in that bottom 3/4, and they don't want to be part of that. So they're not going to go really hard to express the discontent and the misery that we have in our community in the way of deeds. They will talk about this type stuff, but
yes,
fixing the structure like we plan to do and have some accountability, they're not in that. And so
no,
you have said this twice, that you're not hating on anyone. I'm not hating on anyone or any institution, but
no.
they've got to do better. We've got to look in the mirror. We've got to see this hasn't worked in the
I agree.
store.
I agree.
So in closing, as we always close, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
Program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.